All right. Welcome back, everybody. We are learning the Memches Dvarim that the Torah is nicknamed Behem, and today's method is Bamikra Uba Mishna, with learning Torah, learning Chumash specifically learning Chumash and learning Mishnah. It's interesting. The Gemara in Kiddushin on Daf Lamed tells us that when a person has to divide his time of learning, a person has to split his learning into three. Le'olam yishalesh adam zmano. A person has to divide his time of learning into three. You have to learn a shlish b'mikra, shlish b'mishnah, ushlish b'talmud. A third learning Chumash, a third learning Mishnah, and a third learning Talmud. So Rashi over there in that Gemara writes that you have to split the days. One day you learn Chumash. One day you learn Mishnah. One day you learn Gemara. That's what Rashi writes. That's what Rashi says. Tosas questions Rashi. Tosas says, how does a person know when he's going to die? How could you start learning days? You're going to die in the middle. So you're going to... Tosas asks on Rashi. All right, Tosas gives his answer. Tom over there gives his answer. But the Rambam writes that Yishali Shodam Zmano, what the Gemara is telling us is that I need to divide the hours of the day. The Rambam writes, Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah, Parak Aleph, the Rambam says, Ketzad, he says, how does this splitting the time three ways work? He says, let's say you have a regular guy, he's got a job, he has to work. So if there's 12 hours a day, how many hours in the day does he work, and how many hours in the day does he get to learn? So the Rambam says, you take an average guy, so he has to work and earn a living, so he works 3 hours of the day, and he gets to learn 9. That's what the Rambam says. So you work for your 3 hours in the day, and you get to learn 9. So the Rambam says of those 9 hours of the day that you learn, a third has to be spent learning Chumash, a third has to be spent learning Mishnah, and a third can be spent learning Talmud. Then the Rambam says, but that's only in the beginning of your learning. When you're just starting out, when you're getting ready, when you're learning the first time, you spend a third. As you advance, and you already know the Chumash, you already know the Tanach, you already know the Mishnayos, so then you can spend more time studying Talmud. But until you acquire mastery of the Tanach and the Mishnayos, it sounds like from the Rambam that a person should be splitting his time equally. Mikra, Tanach, Mishnah, and Talmud Gemara. It's interesting. You know, the Maharal, when he was alive, the Maharal attempted very strongly to institute educational reform, to change the way that the yeshivas were teaching. The Maharal wanted to institute more limud of Tanach, and more limud of Mishnayos, and more limud of Bekiyas Gemara. The Maharal wanted to print Gemaras with Rashi on the inside, and the Rosh on the outside, instead of Tosfos. Because the Maharal thought that the Tosfos was too much pilpul, was a terminology he would have used. He wanted people to learn more, to have greater yediyas. And the Maharal, some of the things that he argues about is that we don't learn enough Mikra, we don't learn enough Tanach, and we don't learn enough Mishnah. The Torah is the basis and the foundation of all of our studies. If somebody doesn't know Sefer Shoftim and Sefer Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, if somebody doesn't know Sefer Bamidbar, Sefer Shemos, Sefer Devarim, so then how does a person like that expect to learn a Gemara? A person has to have the foundational pieces, the basis. You cannot build a tall tower if you don't first lay a proper foundation. The Mishnah says, Bryce here teaches us that if you want to acquire Torah, you have to start with Mikra. You have to start with Mishnah. Now sometimes we don't want to do that. It's not fancy. We want to learn fancy Torah and lumdus, and we want to be involved and educationally stimulated and deep thought processes. But sometimes I need to study the basics. You know, they tell a story. This is not my story. It's a story in the Medrash. The Medrash is quoted by the Bir Halacha in Orach Chaim Simin Kuf Nun Hey. In Simin Kuf Nun Hey, the Be'er Halacha quotes from the Medrash the following story. And yes, I know that I'm only telling you half of the story, but you can look it up here. It's right here, Be'er Halacha Orach Chaim Simin Kuf Nun Hey, and you can read the whole story. But he tells the story of a young yeshiva bacher or an old yeshiva bacher, doesn't matter, who dies and comes to Shamayim. And he walks into the heavens, and when he walks into the Beis Din, so the Malach greets him, and the Malach says, "Oh, so what did you learn in yeshiva?" And so he tells him he learned this and he learned that, and the Malach says, "Oh, let's do a little bit of a bechina." The Malach is going to give him a faher, an examination. And so the Malach goes over to the shelf in the Beis Medrash in Shamayim, and he takes the first book off the shelf. Now, what's the first book? Bereshis, right? He takes the first book off the shelf, and he opens it up, and he says, "Nu, so tell me, what does it say in Bereshis?" And the yeshiva bacher looks at him, and he says, "Bereshis?" The Malach keeps going. What does it say in Noach? Lech Lecha? What does it say in Yehoshua? What does it say in Shoftim? What does it say in Shmuel? And the bacher looks at him, he says to the Malach, he says, "Well, no, ask me something about Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, maybe Ksubis. What are you asking me shaylas about Shoftim and Shmuel and Divrei Hayomim? Ask me a Ktsos and a Nesivos." The Be'er Halacha writes that when a person comes to the din, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to hold us accountable for all kinds and types of learning. Not only learning of Gemara, learning of Talmud and Svara, but we need to learn Mikra. We need to learn Mishna. We start with the foundational pieces of Tanach and Mishnayos, and then we can advance and move on in our studies to the learning of Gemara. Everybody have a great night. Take care.